So, first of all, this is Vijay, which we all know that I will cover some of the process related information, and so it's long back to see about our channel. So today we are going to see about purchase order and invoice. Generally, if you go with the purchase order, so purchase. What do you mean by purchase order? So it is a document. So the buyer and the seller, what is there between relationship between buyer and seller? That is called purchase order. Like some of the documents. So purchase order is a document a buyer sends here to a seller to request goods or services. It lists what the buyer wants to buy, how much they have to buy, and the price. Once the seller agrees, it becomes a contract that both the parties must follow. So here, what they are actually telling is, purchase order is a formal document which was issued by a buyer to a seller. So it indicates the buyer intents of purchase of goods or services, and it specifies mainly the details of the purchase order, which such as types, quantities, and prices of the products or services. So in the PO, it serves legally binding contract which was seller accepted. So it ensures both the parties are clear on the terms of transaction. So in this, they are clearing the transactions of both. So what are all the quantity, what are all the transaction between the buyer and seller? They are just ensuring the terms of transaction, and these documents helping streamline the document procurement process and provides a record for both the buyer and the seller. So, meanwhile, they are making a document which helps the record for both the buyer and seller. So here, the buyer is sending a seller to request the goods or services, so that the buyer will buy the goods and how much they want with a good price, and seller also agree upon the both the contract. This is known as purchase order and the invoice. So these are all both the documents are very important for the procurement process, but they serve different purposes and are issued at different stages. Here is a breakdown of each and the differences between them. So in simple terms, you can say a purchase order is what the buyer sends to other something, and an invoice is what seller sends to get paid for what was delivered. So the purchase order is begin with the buyer's transactions. They are buying something, and they are sending some orders for something, and invoice was generated and the invoice was given by seller. So after the buyer has paying the invoice, so the seller will generate invoice, and they will uh, the like the invoice will be delivered to the buyer. So purchase order will be issued by the buyer. The purpose of purchase order is a formal document sent from the buyer to the seller or supplier to request goods or services. It routine what is needed, the quantities, the agreed upon prices, delivery schedules, and the terms and conditions. So it will be issued by the buyer. So it is a formal document which we all know. So sent from the buyer to the seller for requesting any goods or services. So the seller will the buyer will send the documents for their goods and services. So in that they will outline what is the purpose they want, so what are all the needed, the goods and quantities. So there will be some of the agreed upon terms and the delivery schedule, like which date it should be delivered, and there was some of the terms and conditions will be mentioned by the buyer. And when it is used at the beginning of the procurement process, it is the buyer's way of authorizing the purchase and the confirming the details of the transaction before the goods or services are delivered. So in this, it is beginning of the procurement process. So in that, the buyer, what they will do, they will authorize the purchase, and they will confirm the details of the transaction before the goods or services are delivered. So in this, the buyer is mention authorizing some of the details of what they want to purchase, and what are all the details they want to confirm with the transaction before the goods or services are delivered. They will list some of the items like PO number for tracking, and the description of the items of services, quantity, price per unit, delivery date and location, payment terms. So each and everything, the key information will be included. PO number for tracking, description of the items. So PO number will be given by the seller, because of we can track with the online, right? So after that, description of the terms and services. So there will be some of the description items and services. So like mobile, or any suitcase, or a pillow, or any picture, or anything, appliances or book, or belt or bag, or bed, or chair, we are ordering something. So there will be some of the description for the certain items and services. So, and the quantity of the goods. So how much they are ordering, quantity. So there will be like a 3 or 4 quantity they will be ordered, like 4 pillows or 4 bed, like that. So price per unit. So for one pillow there will be like 100 rupees. 4 quantity into price 400. Likewise, delivery date and location, which time they want to deliver, and which time, location, and the payment terms. Each and everything will be updated. Payment terms like online payment, or cash payment, or card payments. Likewise, online payments. Likewise, they will electronic payments, check. So there will, some of the payment terms will be there. Basically, invoice was issued by the seller to the supplier. So what is the purpose here? They are updating means. So invoice is a financial document sent by the seller to the buyer, requesting payment for the goods or services that have been delivered. It confirms what was provided and how much the buyer owes. So in this, they are updating about, it is a financial document, and which was sent to the seller to the buyer. So here the transaction begins again, seller to the buyer. First, in purchase order we checked about buyer to the seller. In invoice we are checking about, we are updating about seller to the buyer. And seller is requesting the payment for the goods or services which was delivered. So they will made some invoice, they will generate invoice from the seller side. And they, what are all the buyer ordered, what are all the buyer listed, they will update all the transaction of the goods or services, so that have been delivered, right? So like payment related or transaction, some of the details they will update from the seller side. And it confirms was provided and how much the buyer owes. So after that, the seller will confirm how much they have provided, and how much the buyer updated all the things. And when it is used, after the goods or services have been delivered or provided, it is a seller request or payment based on the terms agreed upon in the PO. So when it will be used. So here they are saying, updating about, after the goods or services it will be delivered. So the seller will request the payment. So after the goods will be delivered to the buyer side. So seller will request for the payment, and what are with the agreed upon in the PO. What are all the PO they mentioned with the agreed and the basic conditions. So the seller is asking for the payment with the agreed upon the terms with the PO. So what are all the key information included here? Invoice number tracking. So they will update some invoice number for tracking. We can track that invoice number in the Google itself. Description of the items or services delivered. So description means like how much product they ordered. So the sum of the description will be mentioned, and how much quantity they delivered they will update in their system. And total amount due they have to pay. So the buyer needs to pay the amount due. They mentioned the amount due and payment terms, example due date. So how much, like the seller will generate the invoice and the payment due, and the payment terms will be updated. Payment terms means like 20 or 25th July needs to pay. So the due date will be the 25th July, means in the 25th July itself the buyer has to pay. If they didn't pay, it will be due. Okay, so it will add as a net due. Seller's contract, and it will add as a due, and they have to pay the additional charges also. Seller's contact and payment details. Here they will update like ABC Private Limited, from Koramangala Main Road. So there will be some and address Bangalore, and pin code will be 56 00028. Likewise, they will update the payment details 56 00018. Likewise, 56 00078. Likewise, 56 00088. Likewise, they will update the contact details and the payment details also, how much they have to pay likewise. And invoice. So there was a difference between the purchase order and invoice. So issued by buyer and seller, from purchase order side issued by buyer, and invoice was generated by seller or supplier. So what is the purpose for purchase order? Which we know that they will buyer will request goods and services, and they will agree the terms and conditions, and they will confirm the transaction terms. And in the invoice, the seller will request payment for goods or services which they provided, and they will generate the invoice. And timing will be before the goods or services are delivered from the purchase order side, and after the goods or services are delivered from the invoice side. Content focus. So here, what is to be supplied and what under what terms? So PO number, description, item, services, quantity. So likewise we see, right? So and then what has been supplied, how much is to be worked. So here the content will be how much the purchase order is they are updating their goods and services, how much transaction they updated. Likewise what are all the goods to be supplied, likewise they will update from the purchase order side, and customer will update purchase order, they will update, and the invoice will be supplied upon how much they have vowed. So like key information which we can say: PO number or description of items and services, quantity of the goods, price per unit, how much the goods, there will be some of the price, and delivery date and location, payment terms, invoice. From the invoice side, they will update the invoice number, description of items, services delivered, quantity of the delivered, total amount due, payment terms, seller's contact, payment details. So these are all the following key information which was followed by the purchase order and invoice department. Role in process: initiates the purchase processes. So the purchase order team will initiate the purchase processes. What is to be by, so what are all the things they have mentioned on the description: PO number, quantity, price, delivery date, payment terms. Invoice team will conclude with the transaction of requesting payment. So invoice team, what they will do after generating the invoice, so goods will be delivered to the purchase order. So they will request for the payment, and they will have to agreed upon the terms which was done by purchase order and invoice. So it will conclude the transaction by requesting the payment. So thank you all. Today we have covered about purchase order and invoice. So I hope this will be useful for you. Once again, it's very pleasure to have done a video about the purchase order and invoice. We will update lots of videos about next terms. So I will update some of the process related updates. I will update what are all the current updates in India. So many things are there, right? So I will update all the things. Thank you.